on practice. He was intent on the threefold training and the study of Dhamma and Vinaya.
But Longput was very jolly.
So
in the
I think
initial parts,
in the last session what we talked was that Ajahn Jaisar himself mentions that the Luangpur of 1950s is very different from Luangpur of 1970s. Okay. And the term he uses is that I have highlighted it and it was very beautiful. So the Luangpur of 1950s is a warrior king of a troubled land, and one of 1970 is an absolute monarch at ease in peaceful kingdom. This is, you can see the distinction. And actually we can see that I think we also talked that if we see there are one or two rare pictures of Ajahn Chah of that time. There is a sense of deep sincerity and stiffness which comes out in the Ajahn Chah's posture, face. Just a second.
क्या हुआ?
दोबारा से कट गया. दोबारा से कट गया. +3 भी काट गया. वो चालू हो गया सर.
4G भी चला गया.
तो बीच में थोड़ी देर चला गया था.
बेसिक नेटवर्क भी आ गया. ब्रॉडबैंड नेटवर्क से.
In those days, you would give regular instructions based on Pubba Sikha. Every day after evening checking, we listened to the Vinaya. All our ways of doing things were in accordance with the Vinaya, right down to the details of annual robe offering ceremony, Kathina. We trained ourselves to cut and sew our own robes to make toothwoods. We incorporated those things in our daily schedule and used them to overcome sloth, torpor, and laziness. And actually, there's this thing, particularly sloth, torpor, and laziness part comes later also, is that the particular weather of that area was very dry and hot, and being in forest for the fellow monks, having this sloth and torpor was a common thing. And it also comes out that many of the monks who were ordained, they might have come from well-to-do families, and in general, possibly in our Asian culture, there is this relaxed attitude, and so because of these three various combinations, the weather, the relaxed attitude of the people, and people might have not done the hard work in past. This was the primary reason that in the initial years Ajahn Chah was very strict towards fellow monks. towards the training. And I think I have read somewhere that this was the possible difference between the Western monks which came to Wat Pah Pong or Wat Pah Nanachat, was that because if first of all, there will be very few people who will be able to come, and those who come will definitely be more sincere and hardworking. And then there was a difference in
self-selection of.
the self-selection.
I think Ajahn Sumedho also mentions in one of the interviews that he gave to a magazine around 1980s, where the interviewer asked him, "What do you see the difference between the monks in Thailand and US?" He said that because of the cultural differences, the monks in Thailand, take it very casually. They come and they disrobe and they go. So the total amount of effort that they put is as compared to the Western monks was lesser. And Western monks, because they had to go through all those motivation barriers and cultural shift, and they are the ones who have dedicatedly thought that they want to devote their life to it. So they are a lot more sincere.
And the next two paragraphs, what really comes out is the overall strict regime which the monks had to follow, whether it was with respect to the time schedule of if it was time for walking meditation, then everybody had to do walking meditation. If it was time till for sitting meditation or doing the daily chores of the monastery. The second thing I think is with respect to the overall duration, like from morning 3 a.m. if monks get up, and the sessions last till 10 or 11 in the night. They can be initially pretty tough for people to adjust to. Sometimes we'll practice until 11 or 12 at night before he'd let us go back. That would give us just 2 hours of rest. How could you go to sleep for 2 hours? You just ended up sitting propped up against a wall or at a tree somewhere near the Dhamma hall. You'll never be in time to ring the bell. Luangpur would always be there first. We tried our best, but we could make who could make it to do with as little sleep as him. So I think this is also the important thing which comes by that it was not that only Ajahn Chah was pushing, but there was this sincerity in himself also. And again, this part, strictness comes up, that you had to do what you were told. If it was a walking period, you had to walk, no question. If it was a sitting period, you had to sit. You weren't to get up. He wasn't joking. It wasn't in him. You had no alternative. If he saw you being stubborn, he would call you over and scold you. He scolded the monks, he scolded the novices. He'd even called a meeting to do it. You couldn't sit around relaxing anywhere, even for a blink of an eye. You couldn't drift in and out of Dhamma hall. He'd ask straight away, "What did you go outside for?" If you'd gone outside to urinate and disappeared for an hour, then that would be it. An hour to urinate? Next time you go, let me know. I'd like to see that for myself. And how could you fail to be afraid? You couldn't skip anything. He didn't joke and he didn't let anything go. If you didn't have a proper walking path or a central area was left unswept, that was it. You'd hear about it the very day. Why not? Are you unwell? If you're not feeling well, then why didn't you come and tell me? Or if you couldn't do that, why didn't you tell someone else? How could you just follow your own mind like that? You are a member of community, aren't you? Or do you think you are living alone? He'll pull upon everything. You couldn't move an inch. You couldn't wander about. Once the session was over, you could carry on practice on your own Even still, if he saw someone walking about, then that was it. Venerable sir, what are you playing around right now? He had really sharp eyes. He didn't let anything go, even very minor matters. If he told everyone to walk and you didn't, then it would be a big deal. If the session was over, you had to go straight back to your kuti. If you hadn't given permission, then you couldn't go anywhere. If there was anything if there was anything the matter, then you had to mention to it. So there were some great stories in those days. It wasn't so much that he forced anybody, but he had an absolute sincerity. That's the way he ran the monastery in those days. But to be frank, we weren't quite up to it.
This is Jan Jaiswar is telling it or Jan Tiang?
Jan
Tiang.
ऐसा तो बहुत बाद में आया.
So I think one of the important thing which comes out here is that essentially it's trying to break your habitual tendencies, and mind will say that you have to rest, you are not feeling, you're feeling tired, or you don't want to do walking meditation, let me just do sitting meditation. So I think many times we fall into, not many times, we always fall into these habits of believing our mind so strongly and then doing things according to that. And I think what Ajahn Chah eventually is cultivating this higher sense of sort of shackling the belief in the mind and following the teachings more seriously. And the next session is also with Ajahn Tihang words, and essentially it also again comes out here is that Ajahn Chah mentioned that his teachings are more like a coconut. He has squashed everything into something round rather than trying to see his teaching as long or short or far or near. And I think the way the reference comes is that because he asked the monks to carry this everything together. They have to carry the Vinaya together, they have to carry the Dhamma together, and there was the distinction was blurred, and the overall emphasis was on the constant mindfulness. And as it comes in Satipatthana, for example, that, and in the first section on the body contemplation, for example, that in whatever posture you are you are mindful of that posture, and in whatever is your breath, you are mindful of that breath. And I think that's the overall theme which we get that Ajahn Chah is giving to the fellow monks, that in whatever way, whatever they are doing, whether they are doing meditation or doing the regular course, let they be mindful, and let every task be done mindfully. So I'll just quickly read that. Mindfulness was his main emphasis, making mindfulness constant and smooth without interruptions, not allowing it to be broken. Whether standing, walking, sitting, lying down or eating, you have to be mindful, because if you lose your mindfulness, the same as losing your life. That's what he'd say. If there was a work project going on, for instance, and we complained that we didn't have the opportunity to practice, he would ask if our breath stopped while we were eating or lying down. How could you be too exhausted to meditate when your breath is so immediate and ordinary? There's nothing more to it than the breath. If you practice and you are mindful, it's nothing more than being with this ordinary breath. That's all he taught. Mindfulness was the main part of it. If you lose your mindfulness, what kind of meditation technique are you going to use? What sort of concentration are you going to develop? What purification is going to take place? You won't know how to achieve any of those things. It's the mindfulness that is important. Coolness and tranquility arise in presence of mindfulness. Internal and external well-beings come with mindfulness. Dhamma and Vinaya, every one of the monastic regulations depend on mindfulness. Without mindfulness, what are you going to make your object of awareness? That's how he taught fundamental principles. So I think this underlying theme of mindfulness and using that as a base, and then whatever the practice one has to do or whatever chores one has to do, that's the, I think, the theme which comes out. And again, in the next paragraph also, again, as Ajahn will keep cautioning the monks about the various attachments they have to sort of break those attachments of family, the background, nationality, about all. Just try. His way of pushing people to look at their conceits and their views, and also I think another thing is that even if, for example, you have done the mistake, it's again that you have to let go of that also. You can't just keep holding the thought that I've done the mistake, and that's what he says, that after you have done something wrong, then put it behind you. Don't hold on to the feelings of right and wrong. As soon as there is holding or attachment, it's not the Dhamma Vinaya. And the next paragraph essentially sums up this particular name of this section, the coconut, which essentially is a round shape. If something is in line with Vinaya, then it's in line with the Dhamma as well. By keeping the Vinaya, you are practicing the Dhamma. Luangpur treated them as interconnected. He never separated Dhamma from Vinaya. He taught us to practice different aspects of the path simultaneously. That's why he said his teachings were in short or long, but were pressed into a sphere like a grapefruit or a coconut. So I think in this next particular section on No Reprieve, this particular theme of Ajahn Chah pushing the monks hard continues, and I think one of the important point which comes out in this particular section is that even if one particular monk makes one slightest of mistake, it is not that that particular monk will hear from Ajahn Chah what the mistake. He will scold everybody, and so much so that everybody became so much afraid of not even committing a slightest of the thing, because they knew that if any one of them makes a mistake, then it's not he who's going to get
community fault. हमने भी एक आध बार आईआईटी में ऐसे किया था, कुछ स्टूडेंट्स क्लास में पता नहीं चल रहा था, कुछ लोगों ने गड़बड़ की, gave punishment to all of the class.
What was the outcome then?
There were some murmurs, but the punishment was of the kind that it was seen in good light.
So So I'll just read from in between. So we would have to keep nudging and reminding each other if we saw anything doing anything at wrong time, because we were afraid of another dressing down. Even if there was only one miscreant, Luangpur wouldn't let anyone else go back to their kutis. Everyone had to sit there and listen to their admonishment. It was no different than if you yourself were being told of. And it was frustrating for those who wanted to meditate or had other business to see. But I think one of the I think essential thing which also comes out is that this way of teaching of Ajahn essentially tries people to look at their suffering. I remember that this particular interaction between Ajahn and Ajahn Sumedho, where Ajahn Sumedho is sitting in meditation hall and Ajahn is talking to some lay person, and Ajahn keeps talking to a lay person in Thai language, and Ajahn Sumedho doesn't know this Thai dialect, and he just keeps sitting there and feeling angry that why he cannot go back to his kuti, why is he sitting there. And at one particular point Ajahn Sumedho is able to see his suffering, and at that point he becomes relaxed and lets go, and he says it's fine. And when Ajahn notices that Ajahn Sumedho has seen that Ajahn Sumedho has got the point, and at that point Ajahn just stops lets him go back to his cooking. So I think this was his subtle way of teaching, and this way of heart practice was also be part of that. And there was this one talk where Ajahn Sumedho also uses this similar practice, where there was this lawn mower in Amravati or UK, where he asked the guy who's doing the gardening to come close to the meditation also, that the lawnmower sound becomes quiet, that can be used to use as a reflection.
But so, I was talking to Arpan last time when I met him, and he said that maybe Arpan should have been here. In the current dispensation, in say Arpan Anachar, the daily discourses and instructions and what to do is very less. You are on your own. In this way that we've been told, Ajahn would tell you now to sit, now to meditate.
No. I think the timings are still fixed and the same schedules are being followed.
It's the only thing is nobody is after you all the time. Of course, but it depends on the abbot to what extent he wants to monitor.
But even daily talks are not there. For example,
there are some, not as a fixed routine. But morning chanting, evening chanting, and
for example, we've
duty
heard
allocation, doing cleaning, all that is there.
But we've heard these stories that Ajahn would make them sit
6
for 5 hours, 6 hours.
And then that is not there. Unless a senior monk is coming and then he gives the talk.
But that talk everybody is looking forward to. But these talks where he's talking about 5-6 hours just to make sure that your agitation comes up.
Yeah, actually I listened to one talk of Ajahn Nyan Dhammo, and he was also telling about that Ajahn will make them sit for the whole night, and he says that he can't do these things to
his monastery.
In his monastery. So yeah, I think that kind of strictness is not there.
Because later he himself had relaxed.
At that time, not
in
so much
60s, late 60s and 70s, Ajahn relaxed the control.
Yeah, even like in initial years, you weren't allowed to take allopathic medicines, but later he allowed that. So I think if you want to see the strictness to level which it goes, you should see the last paragraph. If you went out to urinate, you would be admonished. You had to endure until the end of the session. He'd say, other people can do it, why can't you? You are human being the same as they are. You have got all the same organs. What's so difficult? That's how we did things in those days. Your robe would become completely soaked with sweat, and you would lose so much fluid that way that the ache of urinate would disappear. We were also afraid of Luangpo, really afraid. When he started getting on to us like that, you eat a lot, you sleep a lot. If you eat a lot, then you have to shit a lot, drink a lot, and you have to piss a lot. I've heard those words so many times, but as a result, in our eating, in our actions, we were always very moderate. In those days, there was this great care and precision in how we did things. So I think what we have seen till now is the military-like regime of a general training the soldiers. But you might have also seen that in the evenings in the militaries there will be a party or everybody having a liquor, or depending upon the weather there may be a bonfire and everybody will be singing or dancing or relaxing. So it was not that it was this only bland kind of environment of only strictness. There was this time where Ajahn suddenly switched the role and he became more of a fatherly figure, and those timings were usually in the late evenings of the sessions were over, or possibly in the night, and when everybody would gather around Ajahn in his kuti. And at the time, possibly as the section mentions that the cigarette will be passed around, people will more relax, and the atmosphere will be more light, and Ajahn will be sharing more about his encounters with wild animals, or what kind of hardships possibly he might have gone through, or some other his personal meditation experiences, or he might be teaching stories from Buddha's life. So I think the theme was also of meditation itself. There was no loose talk in per se, but it was in more relaxed way. And I think Ajahn knew at what is the time for strictness and what is the time to apply the balm. And these sessions essentially took that shape that people became more relaxed. And at the end of this session, as it comes out, is that many people have said that the learnings which they had in those sessions, the insights they had were much more profound than the insights we had during his regular Dhamma sessions. So I'll just read the last section, that on these occasions Luangpo effected an apparently effortless switch from commander-in-chief to father figure. That ambiguity of the monk's feelings towards Luangpo became obvious on these occasions, at the same time as fearing him almost as mice do to the cat. In his own simile, as bulgars do to the policeman, they loved and trusted him completely and would savor every moment of their time in his presence. The monk sometimes felt that the points of Dhamma that they gleaned from these occasions went deeper into their hearts than the teachings they received during formal Dhamma talks. They would return to their kutis after these sessions, charged and refreshed, eager to meditate.
These sessions where he was talking with relaxed manner.
Evenings.
Yeah, evening sessions.
Night sessions of stories.
Yeah. So incidentally, I read the short biography of Ajahn Luangpo Liam, and he also mentions about these evening sessions, but he also mentions that he never used to go into those sessions. He used to spend time in his kuti or walking
Unko
path.
niyam was quite different.
Yeah, doing the meditations.
He was allowed by
Yeah.
Ajahn Chah. So he had a different attitude.
So we have a few small sections. We can want to
छोटे हैं तो कर लेते हैं.
छोटे हैं तो कर लेते हैं. So this one, there are short stories. One is this water ride. So there was this well in the forest, and because that area was the water was in short supply, and the well was possibly very nice with sweet water. So what happened was that when many lay followers wanted to come and take the water from the well, Ajahn Chah prevented them from taking the water, and there was this bit of animosity and there was this misunderstanding between the lay followers. The elders of the lay community became very angry about how can monks have such a right when they depend upon the alms and the food from us, that they don't allow us to take the water from the well. But it was not that Ajahn Chah prevented people from drinking the water. It was just that the lay followers typically will have the buckets where they would have stored tadpoles or fishes, and they'll use the same buckets to pull the water, and he just didn't want the water to become dirty. So he'll have a big pitcher which was filled by monks, and he'll allow the lay followers to take the water from that pitcher. And then eventually when this thing was explained, and the message was well received. So that was this story. And there is another section of to catch a thief. So the nuns living in the monastery area, they had grown some trees with.
So the nuns were there in that time also?
वो मैची होते हैं ना.
There was this white robe. They were not fully ordained. So the nuns had.
Something like anagarika.
Nuns had grown the trees which were bearing the fruits, and it so happened that some people would come in the night and will try to steal the fruits. And so Ajahn Chah sets a trap, and you won't believe the bushes with all those kantas and thorns are put on the way, and the trap is led with the monks situated at 3 different locations. So as the thieves are taking the fruits, papayas, the short sound is made so that the thieves became cautious and wants to rush back. And as they are rushing back, they further make a loud noise and shout, so that the thieves will come in a panic mode and will start running. And in this hush and push, and they don't notice the bushes on the pathway, and they fall on that, और पूरे शरीर पे कांटे चुभना और जख्मी हो जाना. This was a thing. And so essentially I think the message which comes out is that Ajahn Chah wanted to give this message that this stealing of papaya is such a small thing that you don't want to develop a bad karma around that. And so this was a message Ajahn Chah wanted to give, and gave a very stern message that these things stopped after that. And
Cats and dogs.
there is a section on the people had this habit of
छोड़ जाओ monastery में अपने कुत्ते छोड़ दे.
अपने stray dogs or stray pets को छोड़, you don't need them. So typically the attitude was that कि आर्म्स फूड में जो भी बच जाएगा वो विलेज मोनेस्ट्री में जो एनिमल्स रह रहे हैं वो रह लेंगे. बट दिस सेक्शन एसेंशियली गिव्स द सेंस ऑफ द विजन Ajahn Chah had, And the way Ajahn requested not to do them was primary for the reason that he knew that the forests were being cut at the rapid pace. When the forests are cut, all the wild birds or animals which were living in the forest, for example, wild chicken or fowls, they will have no place to live and they will eventually become extinct. What he wanted to send out the message to the villagers that let the wild animals or birds live in the pond forest or in the monastery in their natural habitat, and let not the stray dogs or cats try to disrupt the natural order, and that will be the for well-being of them, not in present but in future also. So it was more like a natural park in terms of forest. Okay, we can stop here. So we have this one section, but we'll cover it next time.
Taking roots.
Taking roots. This is the important.
This is the important section.
Yeah.
It talks about language issues and all.
Yeah. So sorry everybody, today there was this network disconnection, so people have to click on the different links and have initial problems.
If there are any questions?
If there are any questions, yes, we can take the questions. So there are 10 people online.
Including that.
You don't know. Arpan, are you online? Arpan, Sangeeta ji.
You are online?
Are you still in traffic?
ट्रैफिक नहीं है
कौन कौन है?
No, you don't get to know
YouTube
the
doesn't
name.
let you know.
अच्छा अच्छा आप बंद हो गया
YouTube doesn't let you know. हम जो पहले सॉफ्टवेयर यूज
हाँ,
करते थे
उसमें तो पता चल रहा था
There was a message earlier from Monica ji and Amrita Nandi. So I know these two persons, and the message from Sangeeta that they are stuck in the traffic jam.
Close the session with some chant and the closing homage. Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba bhavena sada soti bhavantu te bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba dhammanuභāvena saraswati bhavantu te bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba sanghanuභāvena saraswati bhavantu. Arahant Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivade Svakkhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Patipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Thank you. Next Sunday will not be meeting. Yeah, Ajahn Sukito will be here.
Yes. So we don't have any session next Sunday, neither Saturday nor Sunday, as Ajahn Sukito will be there in Dhammarana. Thank you everybody. So we'll close the session today.